Hello, I'm Bishop Jeff Haines, Auxiliary Bishop of the Archdiocese of Milwaukee. Welcome to our daily reflection. A while back, I told you a story about my dad working at the Falk Corporation in the Menominee River Valley. In addition to working for Falk, my dad was part of their baseball team. Falk sponsored a semi-pro baseball team. They played at a very competitive level, oftentimes against other big companies. Their big rival was Allen Bradley, and those games between Falk and Bradley were classics. Now, one year, there was an unfortunate situation where the regular second baseman for Falk couldn't play. Now, my dad was an infielder, so he volunteered to take his place. After all, he was used to fielding on the infield. What he didn't count on, however, was that my dad usually played on the left side of the infield, third base. And as many of you know, when the ball comes to the right side of the infield, it's got a different spin on it. So that night, when my dad was playing second base against Bradley, he had a bad day. He had a few errors that really contributed to the loss. He was really responsible for the loss. And he was driving home kind of in a somber mood, and my little brother Rick, who was probably 7 or 8 years old at the time, was sitting next to Dad, and he started to have a conversation with him. And he said, "Dad, you had a really bad day today, didn't you?" And my dad said, "Well, yeah, Rick, I did." And then Rick said, "You know what, Dad, they were talking about you in the stands, in the bleachers there. They were all talking about you." And my dad says, "Well, yeah, I'm sure they were, Rick." And he says, "You know, Dad, they weren't saying very nice things about you at all." And my dad says, "Yeah, you're right, Rick, I'm sure they weren't." And then Rick said, "You know, Dad, they were using some words, some really bad words that you and Mom said we should never ever say. They were saying about you." And my dad goes, "Yeah, I assume they would be, Rick." And then finally my brother looks at me and says, "But you know what, Dad?" He said, "I don't blame you. I couldn't have done any better." My dad loved that story, and he loved to tell it. And he always said that he was happy that he played long enough that we could watch him have not only good days on the field, but also bad days. And I think he meant that about life as well. He said, there are things that you can learn that you should do, that I do, and some things that I do that you shouldn't. I share that story because our first reading today from Acts chapter 14 is a story of some bad days. It starts out with the Apostle Paul, his companion Barnabas, and they're in Iconium. And they start out with their preaching, and they have a little bit of success, but eventually they say something that riles up the people, and both the Jews and the Gentiles end up chasing Paul and Barnabas out of town, throwing rocks at them. So they escape to the area of Lystra and Derbe, and there they start out fairly well. They meet a man who was crippled, who was lame from birth, and they cure him. And then they announce that this is done in the name of Jesus Christ. But the people aren't listening to that. They think that it's actually Paul and Barnabas that did the miracle, and they start to acclaim them gods, like Zeus and Hermes, pagan gods. And of course, things go downhill from there, and eventually Paul and Barnabas are running out of town again with rocks coming after them. Bad days indeed. You know, when you follow the Christian scriptures, what you realize, and it's kind of amazing, it's how many stories in the scriptures are about bad days. Not only the ones I just shared about Paul and Barnabas, but you go back to the Gospels and the Apostles. Remember when Jesus was talking about discipleship and about what that entails, and in the meantime, who comes up with James and John asking for places of honor in the kingdom? Or he's talking about sacrificing, and he looks at the disciples, and what are they arguing about? Which of them is the greatest? Not good days at all, bad days. And you wonder, why did the evangelists leave those stories about bad days in the scriptures? Why didn't they edit them out? I think the point they would try to make is pretty much what my dad was, that we can learn from our bad days and should learn from them. That we just shouldn't forget them and pass by them, but actually say, what can I learn from them? How can I change certain things? You know, I have a feeling that if we're honest with ourselves, we'd all agree we've all had some bad days during this crisis. And for a lot of reasons, we get upset, don't we? I'm sure upset with the government, upset with too much social distancing, upset with not enough, upset with all of the challenges of going to the store, upset about what's even going on in our homes. If you've got relationships that can get kind of frustrating at times, and you get mad at somebody because you're spending too much time together in the house, or you're trying to do your job from the house and that's getting frustrating, and especially if you've got some kids there and you've got to be teaching them as well. I'm sure there are days where you lose your temper there as well. And there's all sorts of reasons we can get upset with ourselves, and I'm sure at times even being upset with God. But we shouldn't just pass over those bad days. We shouldn't just delete them and forget them and pretend that they never happened, because then we'll never learn from them. You know, it's said that there is no such thing as a bad day if you learn a lesson from it. Let's keep that in mind as we continue to forge ahead with faith and dedication and looking for some better days after learning from the bad ones. I invite you back again for another daily reflection. In the meantime, be safe, stay healthy, and God bless you.